Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mighty Habits. I'm Steven, and super excited to be joined today by Mary, our brilliant co-host, ready to tackle something that's been on a lot of our minds.
Absolutely, Stephen. A topic that's sparking tons of debate lately, and frankly, a lot of concern.
We're going deep into teen anxiety,
Oh.
specifically some of the arguments in Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff's book, The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, this book really gets into what some are calling a mental health crisis among young people. What's fascinating is it goes beyond just the typical stuff, you know, challenging some common ideas about what's causing this whole thing.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. So it's not just the pressures of modern life, but how we're approaching, I guess, challenges and discomfort.
Precisely. Haidt and Lukianoff introduced this idea of three great untruths. Untruths that have become so common in our culture, and they argue, are impacting how resilient young people are.
Untruths, huh? That sounds intriguing. Can you give us just a little taste of what those are?
The first one is, what doesn't kill you makes you weaker. It challenges this whole idea that facing tough stuff helps you grow, right? Instead, they say we're kind of shielding young people from anything uncomfortable, which might actually make them less prepared for, well, life's inevitable bumps in the road.
Almost like we're overprotecting them. Maybe even accidentally making it harder for them to cope. Was the second untruth.
Always trust your feelings. This one really gets at this tendency to put emotions above everything else. Now, the book argues that while feelings are important, they're not always right, and they shouldn't always be the ones calling the shots.
That's a really good point. It seems like this could make people avoid things that might make them feel bad, even if those experiences could actually be good for them in the long run.
Exactly.
Okay, and the third one.
The third untruth, this is a big one. Life is a battle between good people and evil people. Haidt and Lukianoff argue that this kind of us versus them thinking can make young people super sensitive to feeling like they've been wronged and less likely to even want to listen to different viewpoints.
Okay, so if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the book is basically saying these untruths create a culture of fragility, where young people are more likely to see challenges as threats and just feel totally overwhelmed by them.
That's a great way to put it, Stephen. They argue that this mindset can really contribute to more anxiety and depression, making young people more likely to avoid risks, challenges, and even just interacting with others.
So then this raises a big question. How do these untruths actually show up in everyday life? Can you give us some specific examples from the book?
Sure. One example they talk about is this rise of safetyism on college campuses. There's this growing trend of trying to protect students from ideas that might be considered offensive or upsetting.
So it's like we're trying to create these perfectly safe spaces,
Yeah.
but are we also limiting their exposure to different perspectives and maybe hindering their intellectual growth?
Precisely. And you know what? This can actually backfire, making students more anxious and less able to deal with it when they do run into viewpoints that challenge their own.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how all of these seemingly separate ideas actually connect. This focus on emotional safety, mixed with an us versus them mentality, can lead to a real fear of engaging in debate, or even just hearing different opinions.
Absolutely. The book argues that these trends are contributing to less open discussion and more polarization, which in the end hurts everyone.
Okay, so then where does technology fit into all of this? Because I know the book also talks about social media and smartphones,
Yeah.
like how they're amplifying these cultural trends.
Right, that's a key part of their argument. They suggest that social media, with its constant focus on image and validation, can really reinforce this idea that we should always feel good and avoid anything that makes us uncomfortable or criticizes us.
It's like social media becomes this echo chamber,
Mm.
where we're only seeing things that agree with our own views, and anything that doesn't is seen as an attack.
Exactly. And you can't forget about the constant comparison and competition that's just built into social media, which can make feelings of inadequacy and anxiety even worse, especially for young people who are already trying to figure out this complex world.
It's almost like a perfect storm, where these cultural shifts are colliding with the crazy pressures of the digital age.
That's a great way to frame it, Stephen. And it's this convergence that Haidt and Lukianoff argue is really fueling the teen mental health crisis. It's a complex issue, for sure. But the book isn't just about pointing fingers. It also offers some possible solutions and strategies for helping young people build resilience.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some things that parents, educators, or anyone working with young people can take away from this book?
Well, one of the big ones is this idea of what they call wise adversity. It's all about letting young people experience challenges and risks that are appropriate for their age, but in a safe and supportive way, of course.
So not trying to protect them from every little thing, but letting them deal with setbacks and, learn from their mistakes. That makes a lot of sense. What else?
The book really emphasizes teaching cognitive behavioral therapy principles. CBT, it helps people identify and challenge those unhelpful thought patterns that contribute to anxiety and depression.
That sounds super useful. Giving young people those tools to manage their thoughts and emotions, that can make a huge difference. Are there any other key strategies from the book?
Absolutely. The book is all about promoting free play and unstructured time. It argues that allowing kids to explore their world without adults constantly hovering over them helps them develop so many important skills, like creativity, problem solving, and social intelligence.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember spending hours as a kid just playing outside with my friends, making up games and figuring things out on our own. It seems like those opportunities are getting rarer these days.
You're right. And those experiences are so crucial for them to become independent and resilient. The book also talks about encouraging face-to-face interactions and building strong social connections.
It's all about fostering those real-world relationships, right? The
Yeah.
kind that give you a sense of belonging and support, which can really help with anxiety and loneliness.
Exactly. And lastly, but definitely not least, the book highlights the need for adults to model these behaviors ourselves. We can't expect young people to embrace resilience if we're not showing them how to do it in our own lives.
That's such a powerful point. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Showing them it's okay to make mistakes, face challenges head on, and engage in respectful debate, even when it feels uncomfortable.
You got it, Stephen. It's about creating a culture of resilience, not just in schools and families, but in our entire society.
I'm curious, Mary, as you were going through all of this, what really stuck with you personally? Was there anything that surprised you or made you question your own assumptions?
Hmm. What really struck me? It was the emphasis on the importance of viewpoint diversity. It's something we often talk about in terms of, politics or social issues. But this book applies it to our own personal lives, too.
How so?
It's about being open to hearing different perspectives, even ones that challenge our own deeply held beliefs. It's realizing that we don't have all the answers and that we can learn so much from people who see the world differently than we do.
It's about intellectual humility,
Yeah,
right? And recognizing the value of those different viewpoints.
exactly. And this applies to how we raise our kids, too. It's about encouraging them to think critically, question things, and have respectful conversations with people who hold different views.
This makes me think about the whole climate on social media these days. It's so easy to get trapped in those echo chambers and filter bubbles,
Yeah.
where you only see things that confirm what you already believe.
That's a real concern. And it's why it's so important to actively seek out different perspectives and challenge our own assumptions. The book really drives home the point that this kind of intellectual engagement is essential, not only for personal growth, but for creating a more tolerant and understanding society.
So it's not just about protecting young people from feeling uncomfortable. It's about giving them the tools and the mindset to handle a complex world where they're going to come across challenges and different points of view no matter what.
Exactly. It's about empowering them to be thoughtful, resilient, and engaged members of their communities.
Mayor, this conversation has been so insightful. As we wrap up our deep dive into the coddling of the American mind, what really stands out to you?
The biggest thing for me is that resilience isn't something we're just born with. It's a skill that we can learn and develop through experience and guidance.
And it's a skill that's becoming more and more important in today's world. With all the pressure and challenges young people face,
Absolutely. The book gives us a way to understand those challenges and, more importantly, a way to empower young people to face them with strength and resilience.
so as we finish up, what final thought would you leave our listeners with?
I'd encourage everyone listening to pick up a copy of The Coddling of the American Mind and really think about these ideas, whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just someone who cares about young people. This book has so many valuable insights and practical strategies for helping raise a resilient generation.
It's a call to action for all of us to create a world where young people aren't just shielded from discomfort, but empowered to thrive even when things get tough.
Well said, Stephen. And to all our listeners, if you're looking for more deep dives into interesting books and ideas, make sure to subscribe to Mighty Habits for regular updates. We're here to help you navigate life's complexities and reach your full potential.
This has been such a great discussion, Mary. The coddling of the American mind really makes you think about how we prepare young people for the real world, all the ups and downs that come with it.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of those books that stays with you.
It definitely challenges some of the usual ideas about parenting and education. I'm curious, after diving into this book, what's one concrete thing our listeners could do today? to actually put some of these ideas into practice?
That's a great question. Hmm. I think one of the simplest but most powerful things you can do is start a conversation with a young person in your life about these concepts.
Interesting. Not like giving them a lecture or anything, but actually having a dialogue.
Exactly. Ask them about their experiences, how they feel about the pressures they face, what they think about the ideas we've talked about. You might be surprised by what they have to say.
It's about making space for open and honest communication where they feel heard and understood. And like we've been talking about, that kind of communication is so important for beating resilience.
Absolutely. And who knows, you might even learn something new yourself. These conversations can be so enriching for everyone involved.
I love that. It's about inviting them to be part of the solution, not just telling them what to do.
Precisely. And remember, it's not about having all the answers or forcing our opinions on them. It's about listening, empathizing, and helping them develop those critical thinking skills they need to face their own challenges head on.
All this talk about resilience and preparing young people for the world makes me think about the role of mentors.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Think about the impact mentors can have, not just parents and teachers, but anyone who can offer guidance and support.
I think you're onto something. Having someone you trust outside of your immediate family who can give you a different perspective, share their own experiences, and cheer you on, that can be so valuable.
Especially during those teenage years, when young people are figuring out who they are and where they fit in.
So to all our listeners out there, if you've been inspired by any of this, maybe think about how you could become a mentor to a young person in your community. Or if you're a young person yourself, think about who you could reach out to for guidance and support.
Those connections can be life-changing. And like Haidt and Lukianoff say, it really does take a village to raise resilient young people.
Well said, Mary. This deep dive into the coddling of the American mind has been a real eye-opener. I hope all of you listening found it valuable as well.
It's been great exploring these important ideas with you, Stephen.
And if you enjoyed this conversation and want to keep exploring more thought-provoking topics, be sure to subscribe to Mighty Habits for more deep dives into the books and ideas that are shaping our world.
And don't forget to share this episode with anyone who you think might find it helpful. The more we can get these ideas out there, the better we'll be at supporting the next generation.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those mighty habits rolling.